One choice, 10 seconds, $5,000. Most people believe the world is a cold, mechanical place where the rich get richer by stepping on the honest, and the honest stay poor by following the rules. We've been conditioned to believe that survival of the fittest means taking what isn't yours if the opportunity presents itself. But today, in the heart of a city built on brotherhood, a 10-year-old boy with a hole in his shoe and an empty stomach is about to prove that the world's true currency isn't gold. It's character. This is Eleanor Vance. At 62, Eleanor was the architect of the city's skyline. As the CEO of Vance Global, she moved through the world like a ghost in a charcoal suit. She was the quiet lady, not because she had nothing to say, but because her silence was more powerful than most people shouting. She lived in a world of contracts, spreadsheets, and cold, hard logic. She had forgotten the taste of a home-cooked meal, the sound of a child's laughter, and the feeling of a heart that beat for something other than profit. Eleanor was in a hurry. A merger that would define her legacy was happening in 20 minutes. As she stepped out of the car, she reached into her designer handbag for her phone. In that split second of distraction, a gust of wind caught her silk scarf. She stumbled slightly. She didn't feel it. She didn't hear it. But her heavy Italian leather wallet, stuffed with cash, black cards, and a vintage gold locket, slipped from her bag. It landed silently in a patch of tall, decorative grass near the plaza fountain. Eleanor kept walking. The revolving doors swallowed her whole. Enter Toby. Toby was 10 years old, but he carried the weight of a man 3 times his age. He was sitting on a bench in the plaza, his hands tucked deep into his armpits to trap the warmth. He was waiting for his mother, Maya, to finish her shift at the hospital laundry room across the street. Toby hadn't eaten since yesterday. His stomach was a hollow, aching void. He saw it fall. He saw the quiet lady keep moving. Toby walked over to the grass. He reached down and pulled the leather from the greenery. It was heavy. He opened it. His eyes went wide. He had never seen a $100 bill in real life. Now he was holding 50 of them. In Toby's world, that money was a miracle. It was the electricity that had been shut off last week. It was the rent his mother cried about while she thought he was sleeping. It was a life without hunger. The city whispered in his ear, "Keep it. She has so much. She won't even notice it's gone." But Toby looked at the revolving doors. He looked at the money. And then he remembered his mother's voice. Toby didn't put the wallet in his pocket. He didn't look for a place to hide. He bolted. He pushed through the heavy glass doors of the Vance Tower. The lobby was a cathedral of marble, hushed and intimidating. It smelled like expensive perfume and ozone. 2 security guards, looking like statues in blue, stepped into his path instantly. Their eyes swept over his faded hoodie and the duct tape on his sneakers. They didn't see a boy. They saw a nuisance. "Whoa, kid, stop right there. This isn't a playground," the taller guard growled. "The lady," Toby panted, his chest heaving. "The lady in the gray coat. She dropped her wallet. I have to give it back." The guards shared a cynical look. In this building, people fought over decimal points. They didn't return thousands of dollars in cash. "Sure she did, kid. Just hand it over to us. We'll take care of it," the second guard said, reaching out. Toby saw the way the guard's eyes flickered to the leather. He knew that look. It was greed. If he handed it over now, that money would never reach the lady. It would disappear into a pocket, and the truth would be buried. "No!" Toby shouted. "I have to give it to her myself." Before they could grab him, Toby dove between them. He was small and he was fast. He sprinted toward the executive elevators just as the gold-trimmed doors were sealing. He didn't think about the consequences. He didn't think about the no trespassing signs. He jammed his hand into the closing gap, and the sensors tripped. The doors groaned and retracted. Eleanor Vance looked down from her height of 5'10". She saw a sweating, disheveled boy standing in her private elevator, clutching her wallet as if it were a holy relic. "What is the meaning of this?" she asked, her voice like ice. Toby stood his ground. His legs were shaking, and his heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. But he didn't blink. He held the wallet out with both hands. "You dropped this, ma'am, outside in the grass." Eleanor took the wallet slowly. She didn't say thank you. Not yet. She did something that made Toby's stomach turn. She opened it and began to count the money. 100, 500, 1,000, 2,000. She counted every single bill. She checked the side pockets. She pulled out the vintage gold locket. She stared at it for a long time. It was a picture of her son, who had passed away years ago. It was the only thing in the world she truly valued, and it had been sitting in the grass, vulnerable to the feet of strangers. She looked at Toby. She looked at the safety pin holding his jacket together. "It's all here," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Why? Why did you bring it back? No one saw you. You could have walked away and changed your life. Why would you risk getting in trouble with security to return this to a stranger?" Toby wiped a smudge of city soot from his nose. "My mom says that if I keep something that isn't mine, I'm just selling my soul for a piece of paper. She says being poor is just a situation, but being a thief is a choice. I didn't want to be a thief, ma'am." Eleanor felt a sharp, an unfamiliar pain in her chest. She had spent 30 years surrounded by people who would lie for a promotion, who would cheat for a bonus, who would betray a friend for a stock tip. She had come to believe that integrity was a myth told to children. And yet, here was the myth, standing in her elevator, smelling like the cold Philadelphia rain. "What is your name?" she asked. "Toby, ma'am." "Well, Toby," she reached for a $100 bill to hand to him. "Take this. For your honesty." Toby stepped back, his hands behind his back. "No, thank you. I didn't do it for a prize. I did it because it was yours. Mom says a good deed doesn't count if you get paid for it." The elevator reached the 50th floor. The doors opened. Toby turned around and walked back toward the stairs. Eleanor stood in her marble lobby, only holding her $5,000 in her gold locket. For the first time in her life, she felt like she was the one who was empty-handed. Eleanor Vance didn't go to her merger meeting. She walked into her office, sat at her mahogany desk, and stared at the gold locket. The boy's words were a ghost in the room. Being poor is just a situation, but being a thief is a choice. She pressed the intercom. "Victor, come in here." Victor was her head of security, a man who knew how to find anything in any corner of the globe. "I want to know about the boy," Eleanor said. "Toby, he's in the lobby or the stairwell. Follow him. Don't let him see you. I want to know where he lives, who he lives with, and I want to know why his shoes are held together with tape. And Victor, find out about his mother." By 5 p.m., the report was on her desk. It was a story Eleanor had heard 1,000 times in the news but never felt in her bones. Maya Miller, a nurse's aide at St. Jude's, she worked 80 hours a week between the hospital and a cleaning service. She was 3 months behind on rent. Her landlord, a man named Silas who owned half the tenements in North Philly, had served her an eviction notice. She was losing her home in 48 hours. The report mentioned one more thing. Toby had a chronic respiratory condition. The tall grass in the plaza was one of the few places he could sit where the air felt a little cleaner than the exhaust-filled streets of his neighborhood. Eleanor looked at the numbers on the page. To her, the amount Maya Miller owed was less than the cost of the rug in her office. But to Maya, it was the end of the world. Eleanor Vance realized she had been building skyscrapers while the foundation of her own humanity was crumbling. She had the power to move markets, but she hadn't moved a finger to help a neighbor in a decade. "Victor," she said, her voice turning into a weapon of kindness. "Call Silas. Tell him I want to buy the deed to 1422 Jefferson Street today, and tell my lawyers to draft a very special letter." Saturday morning arrived with a gray, biting mist. In a small, cramped apartment on Jefferson Street, Maya Miller was sitting at her kitchen table. Her eyes were red from a night of silent crying. Boxes were stacked by the door. She had $72 in her purse and a final notice from the utility company. "Mom, are we going to have to live in the car?" Toby asked, his voice small as he packed his only 2 books. "No." "A baby," Maya lied, her voice cracking. "We're going to find a new adventure. Everything will be okay, I promise." There was a knock on the door. Not the heavy, rhythmic thud of the sheriff, but a soft, hesitant tap. Maya opened the door. Standing there was a woman in a charcoal coat. She looked like she belonged on the cover of a magazine, not in a hallway that smelled of old cabbage and damp wood. "Mrs. Miller?" Eleanor asked. "Who are you?" "If you're from the city, I told them I just need—" "I'm not from the city," Eleanor said gently. "I'm a friend of Toby's. He helped me the other day when I was lost." Eleanor handed Maya a thick cream-colored envelope. "I can't accept charity," Maya said, her pride flaring up even through her desperation. "It's not charity," Eleanor replied, looking at Toby. "It's a dividend. Your son invested in the soul of the city when he returned my wallet. This is just the interest on that investment." Maya opened the envelope. Her knees hit the floor. Inside was the deed to the apartment building, not just their unit, the whole building. It had been purchased in the name of a new trust, the Miller Integrity Foundation. There was a check to cover Toby's medical bills for the next 5 years, and at the bottom, a scholarship for Toby to the most prestigious academy in the state. "Why?" Maya whispered, clutching the papers to her chest. "Because," Eleanor said, reaching out to touch Toby's shoulder, "you taught your son that his soul was worth more than a piece of paper. And I realized I needed to learn that lesson too." They say the quiet lady never went back to her old ways. She still built skyscrapers, but now, the ground floors were always reserved for community clinics and youth centers. She became the city's greatest advocate for the working poor, using her steel and glass empire to shield those the world had forgotten. But the story isn't really about Eleanor. It's about a boy who saw a fortune in the grass and chose to keep his heart instead. We live in a world that tries to convince us that being good is a weakness. We are told that nice guys finish last and that honesty is for people who aren't smart enough to get away with a lie. But look at Toby. Look at the ripple he created. One act of integrity changed the fate of a family. One child's refusal to be a thief saved a powerful woman from herself. Kindness isn't just a nice thing to do. It is a powerful force that can rewrite the future. Your character is the only thing you truly own. It is the only thing the world cannot take from you, and the only thing that remains when everything else is gone. So the next time you find yourself in the tall grass, facing a choice between what is easy and what is right, remember Toby. Remember that the quiet ladies of the world are watching, waiting to see if there is still light left in the shadows. Pass the message. Protect your soul. Because honesty is a currency that never loses its value, and a single return wallet might just be the compass that leads an entire city back home. If this story touched your heart, remember that honesty starts with us. What would you have done with that wallet? Tell us in the comments. And if you believe that kindness is the ultimate power, share this video with someone who needs a reminder today. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of moral strength and human resilience. Until next time, stay intentional.